We're live. Perfect.
Awesome.
You trying to outbeard me? What's going on here? The peppered beard man, 40-something look going on? What?
I've had this for a couple years now, and the chicks dig it. They like it.
No. Well, it started coming in peppered, and I have not had success with the women. I haven't. I thought that was going to be like, oh yeah, he'll be old enough to know better and maybe have a little bit of money. Nothing. Hasn't helped me. Gray hair hasn't helped me at all.
I am struggling with, there's a new hashtag out called COVID hairdo or COVID cut, because
COVID cut.
all the barbers are closed here anyway.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So the sides of my hair are starting to get too long, and I've noticed that some people in my social circles are letting their wives cut their hair and stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I'll let my daughter maybe do it. It'd probably be pretty good.
It's nothing we haven't seen in college. Did you ever cut your own hair in college?
I did.
Yeah.
I cut it myself. I cut bangs right across the top of my head right there. Sure. I looked like Spock or something.
Yeah. And I remember I'd have like the shavers and whatnot. And the back was always difficult because you'd sit there with a mirror and then inevitably I just got a girl to be kind of, not to cut my full head because that'd be too much of a favor to ask, but just to get my back because it was just a horrible, I'd have like gashes and stuff. Yeah, you'd saving $8 a haircut there back in 1997 or whatever.
That was a pitcher of beer in a lot of places.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that was a meal. The haircuts were, there was Ann's Barbershop. I don't think they're open anymore over at the U of M. It was $5. That was pretty cheap. But even then, $5, that was like 3 meals if you knew where to go.
Yeah. Real money.
But speaking of money, let's get to your business here because you and I have dual aims and the paths cross. So it is mutually beneficial. And yes, this is kind of an advertisement, but at the same time, not really, because I am philosophically behind your business. Why don't you tell anyone who doesn't know in my audience who you are, and then I'm going to tell them why I like having you on, and we like to talk to you every once in a while.
Yeah, sure. My name is David Barnett, and I used to be a business broker at one time, which meant that I represented people who were trying to sell their business, and I would find a buyer and help put the deal together and help the buyer get the financing. And I left that business at the end of the last recession in 2011. And it was a terrible business for me to be in because it's commission driven and cash flows up and down. And I have 2 kids that I'm raising. And so I left it for a lot of reasons, but I got drawn back in by people who kept looking for my help because they wanted to do one of these deals. And I realized there was a much bigger market for people who just wanted to hire someone to help them, much in the way people will hire your friend Chad as an accountant to help them with their tax returns or hire an attorney. So I created a new kind of business based on consulting and helping people work through projects, eventually realizing 80% of the stuff people wanted to know from me was the same stuff from every person. Mm-hmm. So I eventually created these online courses so that I could serve many people all at once. And so I help people buy and sell businesses, and I do it through consulting and information products, and then just a ton of free stuff. I've got 400 videos, I think, on YouTube right now, and most of it is driven by people asking a question, and I say, that's a great question. I make a video about it, or I interview somebody. So I'll have, on Wednesday of last week, I had a fella who was talking about how they use UCC Article 9 to wash away unsecured debts from a business. If a guy business owner gets into too much trouble with too many debts, it's a way to actually transfer the business to someone else, get rid of the bad debts in a non-judicial way, which means the lawyers and the courts don't get involved like in a bankruptcy.
Mm. Well, and see, this is one of the several reasons I like, all these ins and outs. You've worked in the industry. Like, we had a conversation about franchises, and all these unknowns that you know about are just landmines your average business buyer, your average person who wants to be an entrepreneur do not know about. And it could be a big risk. And the main reason I have no problems advocating you or your service is because when I was working in banking, what would you say percent of small business owners that actually make it? I'm saying it's 15 out of 100, less than 20% from my experience. If anything, I saw people ruin their finances trying to do a dream, or maybe not even a dream, but just running a business is a risky endeavor. And unless you do it right, you can, and you statistically are very likely to destroy your finances. And so having you guys, pay Dave the $1,000 an hour, whatever it is he's charging, even if it's oh my gosh, it's 5,000. That's better than emptying the 95,000 in your 401k. And so that's why I recommend people tune in. But it's the other little things that that's amazing as well.
It's funny you talk about success, because when people ask about what's the rate of business success, I say, how do you define success? Is it having a business where you earn a level of income relative to your skill set and then have a profit in the business beyond that to recognize the investment you made? Or is it simply having the doors open? Because there's a lot of different statistics out there. And when you start to actually work on the definition of success, is it how many businesses have closed versus how many people are truly successful? A lot of people will spend years not taking any kind of salary, putting their labor and their efforts into a business that never really makes any money. They might actually hire people. The business might be worth more to their employees than it is to them. And they're never able to breach the hill, to get up to that place where they're actually having a 6-figure cash flow and getting a return on the capital they put at risk. That's why I'm an advocate, not of starting businesses, but actually buying them that already are making money. So you get a good job, you save up your money, you get some capital, and then you go looking for somebody who wants to retire, who's got a good business with customers, and you make the right kind of deal so that you acquire that cash flow. And we talk about buying businesses, but when people buy a business, they are buying a cash flow. That is the number one thing that they're doing. And the price that they're willing to pay for the cash flow is a factor of the risk. It's how much is the cash flow and what is the risk? And that's the thing that's blown up here in the last 3 weeks, because now we have people who 3 weeks ago owned a business, and today they own some furniture and equipment because they've been told by a public health official that they have to close. And so at this very moment, the business doesn't function. And so now the risks are through the roof because we don't know what's going to happen at the end. I reached out to you a couple of weeks ago about doing this because I was doing the live event in Vegas on April 30th, which is now not going to happen because planes are not going to be flying around. I mean, everything's winding up to a halt here. And one of the great things about a live event is meeting people and answering their questions and stuff. And I know that you were promoting the event, and I got a huge number of people from your audience come through to look at the page.
My audience is pretty awesome. We're just the best audience, frankly, in general. But yes.
Well, and that's why I thought maybe it would make sense for me to come and talk to them, in one of your shows.
Yeah, and so and by the way, if you guys have questions, shoot them over to. I mean, don't send them. Here's my financial statements. That's what you pay him for. But if you had some general stuff about it, we got a little bit of time here. What do you have to be leaving anytime soon or anything like that? Nope. You got about an hour. Okay, good. We're not in a rush then. So send it in the chat room, and don't bother with super chats. You don't have to pay. I'll try and get to the questions here as much as we can. Let us talk about that though. The seminar you were going to offer, because now it's going to be offered online, and that's in part why we're here, is to promote that. Why don't you tell people about the online seminar that you've converted it into and why they should attend?
Yeah, sure. So my course on how to buy a business started as a live seminar 10 years ago, and it's evolved over time. And it became an online course a few years ago. And I still do the 3-hour live workshop because there's something really special about being in a room with people and seeing their faces and getting the live reaction and following the conversations as the questions come through. And so I've always kept doing what I call the abbreviated version as a live session. So that's what Vegas was going to be, is going to be the 3-hour session. And I did it in Toronto on March the 8th. But then after that, I mean, everything started to wind up. So, and what I normally do is at the end of the session, I think tickets are about $80 or so for Vegas. I know there was a more expensive one, but it was for some one-on-one time with me as well. And then at the end of the class, normally what I do is I say, if you want the full online version that you can go and study at your own leisure, then you can upgrade. And I make people a special offer. So the full course normally is $379 US. And I thought so many people from your audience were interested in checking it out that I should just come on here and give a special price for your audience if people want to do it. Now, especially some people probably have time on their hands to go through the material.
Yeah. Now's the time to think about this type of stuff.
Yeah. So the full program, if any of the people in your audience want to do it, I'm offering $100 off. So it's only $279. And to your point earlier, most of the people who finish the program, while they may not have full confidence on moving forward with a good deal, they can certainly recognize a bad one, which is 90% of the deals you come across.
Right. And that's my main concern is more the threat assessment. There.
So it's kind of like insurance, you know?
It really is the safety course. All right. I've provided in the comments here. There's also in the comments or description below a link to it. It's a Gumroad. Do you remember what the passcode was? Cause it says here, Clary, they get a discount is it Cappy, Clary?
It's Clary.
Jerkwad. It's not Jerkwad.
No.
Okay. All right. It's Clary. CLAR.
It was, then I changed it to Clary.
See, I don't want to curse because I want this to actually make it. We got to be so nice and polite here, David. It's just so nice. Love it so much. So now in another reason it's opportune to have you on right now. And it may be too early to tell, but when there's blood in the streets, things to buy. I bought stock last week, and you were in the world of small private company, maybe not so small, but private companies, privately held companies, not the stock market where it's very liquid. Inevitably, though, assuming this recession sticks around for a while, the prices for private companies are also going to drop. Have you seen any of that happening in your field so far yet?
So here's what happens in the world of privately held small businesses is that when something like this happens, or when there's a recession in general and sales go down, you could have a sales decline of 10% in a small business that leads to a profit decline of 50%. Right. Because you've got fixed expenses that are stuck and variable expenses you might save a little bit. But the price of the business is based on the cash flow. So if in a general recession, if the sales go down by 10% and the cash flow goes down by half, the value of the business just dropped by half. So if the owner of the business doesn't need to sell, they're not going to. They're going to say, oh my God, I've got to survive. I'm going to wait it out and I'm going to build the business back up before I get out. The people who are going to sell the business anyway are people who have a legitimate personal need. So burnout, divorce, poor health, the need to relocate or move, those guys are going to have to make a deal no matter what. And it's not necessarily that they're willing to sell for less. The price does move. But what really changes in downturns is that the terms of sale change dramatically. 3 weeks ago, the Small Business Administration was doing a 7A program offering up to 90% financing in the United States for business acquisitions. Today, put them in the business of helping boomers retire. That whenever you offer large leverage, it helps the sellers, right? Well, nowadays, they're not in that business anymore. Now they're in the help businesses survive mode, where they're talking about giving loans to people based on their expenses to try to keep the doors open. So if you were to walk into a bank today and say, I want to buy this business that has 3 great years of earnings track records, and can you lend me 90%? The banker is going to say, are they open today? And if they are, what are their sales? Because if the banker doesn't believe you can make the payment based on what's happening today, they're not going to make the loan. And so back in 08, 09, when I had my brokerage office opened, we were in the midst of the recession. I think I did 9 deals 1 year with no bank financing at all, because the banks weren't confident enough to do the deals. It ended up being the buyer putting some money down and creating some sort of a promissory note or a series of notes that the seller held to take payment over time.
So kind of seller financing is what it was?
Yeah. And because there's no other place to get the money, especially when we draw into question whether these sales are going to come back. Everyone out there seems to think that we pulled the plug on the economy and in 3 months' time, we can put the plug back in. And as you know, when you lay off 20% of the workforce, those people aren't going to have the same disposable income when they go back to work. And, so people who are working today, guys who are building houses or something like that, they're always working on a contract they have today, but they're always working towards a contract being written today that's going to be worked on tomorrow. Well, no one's buying a house today either. So this ripple that started with the retail and service workers is going to move through the economy, and it could potentially be a lot worse than people are imagining, I think.
So even with the snapback or the all clear signal is given, it's not going to come back in a quarter. It could take a year, actually, but very easily a year to get back to where we are now, to get back to those figures that would be what quote unquote operating temperature of the company. And that's assuming it comes back. My concern, which I'm not too concerned about, and I don't know why, because I'm getting lazy in my old years, I don't think about it as much anymore, is I don't believe we're really cutting into the meat of this economy. I think it truly is a natural disaster. It's not changing the infrastructure of the economy. I do believe once the all clear signal is given, things will get back to normal, but not a snapback, not as quickly as they decayed, certainly not. But it doesn't change the fact that you may be buying a company that looks cheap now, if you're lucky enough to get financing, but that doesn't guarantee it's going to be coming back in the future.
Yeah. And what is a great advantage? See, this is what makes now such a great time for somebody to get ready. If you have an income today, if you have savings, if you have very low personal debts, if you haven't been silly buying big screen TVs on credit cards and stuff like that, then you're in a position to make a move. And right now, if the banks aren't lending, it empowers buyers. See, if you buy a business, let me backtrack. If you buy a house, you can hire a home inspector, and they can check it out, and they can tell you that they have a worry about the plumbing, or they're worried about the roof, or something like that. When you buy a business, it's a very fragile system with employees and inventory and receivables and payables, and everything's kind of changing in a fluid way. It's very difficult to take a snapshot of that and see with absolute certainty what it is you're buying. So there's always a little bit of risk when you buy a business. And this is why my students anyway learn that no matter what, you want to have seller financing, which is subject to offset in the case of a material misrepresentation. So if they gave you information that was not correct, you have recourse. You can make an adjustment on that note. And if they disagree with you, they have to sue you instead of a transaction where you pay them all the money on closing day and then you have to go and sue them. I mean, suing people is expensive, takes a long time, right? And then you have to fine them if you get a judgment and hope they haven't spent the money. So the deal structure is important. When banks are not lending, it means that the sellers are more motivated because the guys who don't have to sell won't, just as we explained. And so you get more seller financing because there's no other place to get the money. And what that means is more flexibility and more ability to control risk on the part of the buyer.
Well, and that's something I didn't realize, but underappreciated. One, the pricing, because if you don't have billions of dollars flooding the market through the banks, your pricing financially is going to be lower than it was before because people just can't go out and get it. Then when you do the seller financing, okay, fine, you're bypassing the banks. You're probably getting at a lower price because there's not as much money flooding the market, but it also keeps the seller in there as well, especially if you throw in some caveats and some of the legal. And I know this sounds vulture-esque, but that's the reality of the economy. Yes, you want sellers desperate. You want to get them, and you do want them contracted in and obligated and tethered to the success of this company to manage your risk. So it may, and that's another reason why I want to have it. It is opportune. You don't want to be buying when things are hunky dory and happy go lucky. This is now the time to find yourself an asset in the form of a business, an income cash flow. I'm sure you go over that in your seminar. A cash flow generating asset, and if you have the position of power to do it, absolutely. It kind of reminds me, it's not perfectly analogous to buying a business, but I remember I couldn't find a contractor for the life of me to show up on time, sober, to put in some gutters because I didn't have a ladder tall enough to reach it. I'm like, look, just to put in some gutters, not big enough, too small of a project. I don't have time. You never hear back from them. Well, then everyone's banging on my door in 2009. Hey man, got any work? And so just because, oh boy, I really shouldn't take advantage. No, take advantage. Now's the time. If they've mismanaged their finances, or not to say that their failure, their plight is your success, but if you can get an asset for a third of the price or half of a price, of which the financing is usually your largest expense, either that or your lease because you finance the physical building or property. If you can get it at a cheap price and therefore lower amortization costs, lower rent costs, etc., you drastically increase the chances of you having a successful business and ultimately retiring early, which I presume is one of the main goals of most of your clientele.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not. Let me help you with your worry that you're feeling a little bit like a vulture.
I don't. I'm talking some of my audience still has a soul, but I'm working hard. But me, I'm fine. I'm holding back right now because of what I saw in bank. I'm just trying to be very polite, but you won't have to worry about my soul. No.
See, like right now, I'm helping a client who is trying to buy a little bakery business, and they closed. They closed the bakery because of the COVID thing. And so the offer, what they've done is they haven't changed the price of the offer. What they've simply said is now we don't know any of this stuff. We don't know what the sales are. We don't know what the profit is, et cetera. So what we'd like to do is change the deal so that we'll pay you less money on closing day. So we're paying you for the value of your equipment, leaseholds, and your inventory. And then the balance, this amount that represents the goodwill of your business, we'll owe you this amount of money and we'll pay you according to this schedule if the 2021 sales hits the average of 2018 and 2019.
Okay.
So basically they're saying nobody knows what's going to happen. And if we are able to take this business and it ends up being the business you showed us, because that's the main thing. If they were shown the 18 and 19 financials, that's what the buyer's buying, that track record. If it turns out that is what the business ends up being in 2021, then yeah, we'll pay you. We'll pay you. But if it never comes back, if it never returns, if we end up buying ourselves a job where we have to work there 60 hours a week just to scrape by because the customers never really come back the way they used to be, we can't pay you for that because that's not the business you showed us that you were selling. And that's what's changed so dramatically here with this thing. You can say it's unprecedented. I think that a natural disaster or suddenly changing to a wartime economy are the two closest parallels you could probably associate this with.
Well, and why you hire David, you have experience in structuring these deals, because what you've done is vulturing is kind of what it seems like, but the deal you just described there was actually very fair and equitable, and it managed risk. And you've done deals like this before. You know how to structure them. Again, pay Dave his bleeping fee, so you don't have to go to the lawyers. Do you want to pay Dave 1/1000th of what you're going to pay the lawyers, or do you want to pay the lawyers full price? That's all I'm offering. That's all I'm suggesting. So, but are you still there, Dave? Oh, there you are. Okay, yeah. All right. Now I did have. Let's go in the chat room, see if there's any questions instead of like trolls and cursing and swearing. See if there's any. Because this is the peanut gallery you're having to do. See, Juan got an $8 haircut. Here's some Shane Pierce. This is just fan. Rich Cooper to Aaron, Clary to David Barnett are 3 YouTube subscriptions I never imagined would collide. Have you ever run in with Rich Cooper? You ever hang out with him?
I don't know him at all. No.
Hey, if you want, go contact him. I could put you in contact with if you're looking to do more advertising. But he's also kind of the entrepreneurial. He works for himself. His YouTube channel was Entrepreneurs in Cars, so you guys would complement each other. Yeah. I've heard
his podcast before.
Yeah, we like to keep you guys on that side of the parallel over there. But definitely. Never started business. Blah blah blah. Yeah, these are just the Hanyackers here. Oh, here we go. Here's one. Oh, let's do a Shane first. He gives you a compliment. I've gone through both of Dave's programs. Good stuff. Haven't bought a business yet, but when I do, I'm prepared.
Awesome. Thanks, Shane.
That's good. All right. So here's John Patrick. Hey, Aaron and David. I'm a dentist and looking for something that I can buy which doesn't take my full-time self-storage or similar. Am I chasing a unicorn, or should I just invest in the market? I know nothing of dentistry. Let's have you handle that one.
Yeah. So a dentist is somebody who can earn a high income, but they got to have their hands in people's mouths all the time. So it takes all of their time. So there's a certain limit to the scalability of that business. I know there are some dentists that have practices where they have hygienists and other dentists working under them and stuff. But the sort of passive income looking for mini storages and things like this, up until recently, this was becoming harder and harder to do because of what's been going on in the economy with the central bankers. You know how they've been keeping the interest rates low? Mm-hmm. They've been driving people further and further to look for yield. And so the the investment guys, the private equity guys, those people in the big office buildings in Chicago and New York, they've been going deeper and deeper into places where they've never gone before looking for yield. So, there are big firms now that are buying up car washes and mini storages and even as small as 6-unit apartment buildings because they're looking for yield. They can't find it in the bigger markets anymore because of that.
There's that much money floating around. Yeah.
Well, because of all the money that's been printed up, right, with all this QE. And so these guys used to at one time buy stocks and bonds and things like that. And now they have to go looking for this kind of thing in order to find those yields. And what ends up happening is things just get priced for perfection. And I've seen it in particularly in spaces like special care homes, right? Especially where you got a lot of government supported patients that are in those homes.
All right.
People say, "Oh, the government's not going out of business." It's like certain money, you're going to get it. They get priced for perfection. And then someone will build a new place and the patients will want to move over there. And all of a sudden they're dealing with vacancy and stuff they never anticipated. So every business has risks. And it's when people think things are going to go perfectly that they overpay and they get stuck, So it's very difficult to find something that you don't need to manage full time. But what you may want to do is you may want to find someone who has a full-time effort available, who doesn't have all the capital available, and look at working with that person so you can create some kind of partnership and you can be the money person. I know an orthodontist here where I live in town who provides capital to a bunch of other entrepreneurs who are spending their full time running those businesses, and they've got a pretty good agreement as to what kind of return he gets on the money he put up. And that might be an option for someone like a dentist, because your highest earning is going to come from working right there with the patients.
You ever look into, when I was a kid, because I was a little kid when we didn't have money, and I'd scrummage around underneath Coke machines and washers. I get quarters and nickels and dimes. Is that another field where you have your automatic machines, be it a soda pop machine or laundromats? Are those also being picked off by these hedge fund guys?
Not so much. They have a whole other series of problems. Things like ATMs and vending machine routes and stuff like that. They have difficulty with financing, so they can't get their leverage. And that has to do with the fact that they're all cash businesses and they happen to be particularly loved by people who have cash to launder.
Oh, okay. That might be why someone told me the St. Paul Mafia was in the money changing rag. I was like, really? There's a mafia out here?
I've heard stories about organized criminals being involved in all kinds of coin op type businesses because then they can feed in cash from other ventures. Right.
No, it makes. I was just thinking, like, why am I getting bumped off for my Pac-Man game I have at the local pizza place? That's so. Anyway, so for John, yeah, we can't recommend any investment advice for the market, but what are some areas people could look? Because my logic, which only goes the next level deep, because I'm not looking to start a business, but if I had cash, I always like the idea of self-storage or land or parking lot, very minimal capital and structure. Is there any areas that you'd recommend now, or is it still yet to be seen how the chips may fall?
Yeah, I think everything's up in the air now with what we've just seen. I mean, there are people that live in tiny apartments that are renting these mini storage units. And if one of those people lost their job, Storage Wars is going to become its own channel.
Oh, I hope so. I won't mention what, but there's a particular classic car I'm looking to buy. And I'm like, no, it's still too pricey. And I'm just going to wait. See, that's the thing. We're so early on this. I mean, how long has this really been? A month?
Well, I mean, I'm entering my third week of being told to stay home, and the second week of it becoming like a state of emergency where people have to stay home. Yeah. So I still think we have a few more weeks or maybe a month more to go.
Right. And this, your accounting cycle is a month. We won't even know this until a week into next month for the month of March. I'm just very impatient. I thought, oh, stock market crash. Why isn't that classic car I want crashing by 33%? Oh, liquidity. Dang it. So I'm kind of, and it's going to be the same thing. It'll be a little bit, it's not going to happen today or tomorrow. I mean, it's happening gradually, but I really do want these asset prices to go down. Let's see if we got other questions here. Eastern Pennsylvania. Now everyone who isn't a dentist is giving John advice now in my audience. I hate to say that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the thing is when people go out to buy a business, they usually have two hats on, because most of the time when you buy a small business, the manager of that business is the one selling it. He leaves. He's usually the owner. And when you buy it, you're both making an investment and you're going to take over that job, because most buyers of small businesses become the manager. And so you've got two different hats on. You have to be aware of both of them. So what kinds of things am I qualified to do? And what kinds of things do I like to do? And what am I interested in? This is actually going to inform sort of the scope of the industries you're going to search in, because you can't go buy a business you're disinterested in. So if you're an engineer who works in manufacturing, you can have the most profitable flower shop ever, but you shouldn't buy it, because
no,
you're not going to be excited by that. Maybe you'll change some of their processes in the flower shop, and then you'll get frustrated. The business has to be something you find exciting, that will take advantage of your skills. And most importantly, I tell people to look for problems, because if a business has been making money consistently for a long time and it has problems that you see that you know how to fix, that's your diamond in the rough, because you can buy that business and do nothing. It'll make you money. But then when you apply your own skills and talents to fix those problems, it'll perform better. And then it'll help you. It'll look like you got a really great deal at that point, because you'll be making more without it having cost you anymore.
I know it's a microcosmic analogy, but I always envied carpenters, because like, dude, you could cut your biggest expense on your personal budget, your living expenses, assuming you buy a house. You could cut that thing in a third to a half, because you know how to build most of your own house, or a significant part of it. So, all right, here we got a real question. Chartreuse Circle, looking at online business that sells via Amazon. 500,000 earnings before interest, taxes, debt, and amortization. With 500K in inventory, the seller must buy along with the company. 2018 to 2019, average gross revenue was 2.5 million, 990,000 Amazon fees. Boy, I don't know. Do you see that on your screen?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I translate that to English. I don't know what that is.
So basically what the person is saying is that this business earns a $500,000 cash flow before they pay for interest, taxes, or account for depreciation or amortization. And they've got $500,000 worth of inventory. And the person is saying that the gross revenue is 2.8 million and that they pay Amazon 990,000 in fees. Is it worth it? Amazon FBA businesses are very popular because people have this impression that these kinds of businesses fit into that 4-hour work week lifestyle, where you source the product in China, it comes over in a container, you deliver it to Amazon, they take care of everything. The problem with that Amazon FBA category is twofold. Number one, there are a lot of people chasing that space because there are a bunch of people promoting this online.
Are you saying during a gold rush, there are people selling gold painting equipment and they're the ones who make the money?
Yeah, so they're teaching people how to set up Amazon FBAs, and now they're teaching people how to buy Amazon FBAs. What I don't like about it is that the entire business is built around the platform of Amazon. And if Amazon makes any kind of changes, then you can suffer. I've got a group coaching program for people trying to buy businesses. And I have some successful Amazon FBA people in the program that are.
What's FBA, real quick?
I'm fulfilled by Amazon.
Okay, fulfilled.
It means your product goes into their warehouse. They take care of picking, packing, shipping, all that, all the nuisance you can imagine if you were trying to sell stuff from your garage. Right?
Okay, right.
They do it all. So these Amazon FBA guys that have built Amazon FBA businesses, they're taking their profits. They're in my program because they want to buy something else.
Okay, so they're looking out. Margins are getting crushed, and they're like,
yeah. And the worst thing about Amazon is that the people who really know Amazon, they can mine the data. There's ways of learning what people are selling and how much is being sold. They can calculate the margins. So there are people now who are sniping profitable SKUs by finding things where people are making money, and then they're bringing their own product. And the worst of them is Amazon itself. So if you bring in a product that is selling gangbusters with a high margin, they'll see that data. They'll get their own private label brand of that product, and they'll put it on their own shelf.
Oh,
And they learned that trick from the grocer.
Really? Is that what a grocer had that idea?
Because the grocery stores have had this idea for 30 years, right? The store brand products.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the knockoff
right?
brands. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
They could see who which products were selling, and they're like, geez, we could have that made under contract, put our own name on it, sell it for a dime less.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, there we go. Let's go through a little bit more. I don't know if this is a specific question. What if this lasts for another 2 months? Will the bailout money keep business afloat long enough to get back on their feet? With QE, where do you believe all the money will go first? Homes, food, etc. Well, for 2 months, yeah, we'd print off enough money for that. I'm not that. Ask me in 2 months if it's still around. Then we have something to worry about. We're just gonna ratchet up the federal government debt again, increase the money supply. That's what's going to happen.
My fear, Aaron, is after the 2 months, because I read the details on the SBA. They're going to be offering 250% of monthly expenses to businesses that qualify as long as they don't lay off employees, and it becomes forgivable.
Right.
So it's basically a direct subsidy to businesses to help them stay open.
Right.
But the cash demands on a business are more than their expenses. This is what a lot of people don't get. So, things like principal payments on loans, that's a cash demand on a business. It's not part of their expenses. And so my fear is that even if people manage to survive with the bailout money and the subsidies to get through to that, theoretical target date when everything opens up, then what happens next? Because some of the people who've been laid off, who don't have a regular income, they're going to be getting, different government subsidies, direct payments, etc. We know that money is not enough. People are used to living on more. And so what's happening to those individuals? People with savings are going to be spending some of the money they saved. Other people are going to be going deeper into debt. They're going to use their credit cards to try to make ends meet until they can get working again. It's not business as usual. When we attain our normal level of commercial liberty, I guess is the best way to put it, when we're free to go about our business again, will those people be spending as much money? Because the people who've racked up credit card debts, if they can get a job, they're probably going to want to pay down those debts. Right. And the savers are going to want to reaccumulate their savings. So there's not going to be the same amount of aggregate disposable liquid income flowing around the market. Mm-hmm. People who might normally today go out for $100 dinner for two are going to grab a 6-pack and head through the drive-through. They're still going to want to go out, but they're going to make a different choice. There was a great article that was shared the other day. Cheesecake Factory has sent letters to their 350 landlords informing them that they will not be paying April rent. Mm-hmm. And when you're Cheesecake Factory, you have that kind of clout, right? And so, they're not going to be paying that rent. So the landlords have to decide to change the locks, kick them out. And if they did do that, they'd have to find new
leasehold improvements, which there is no money for. No one's going to expand doing leasehold improvements. Right.
So the landlords are stuck. So then what are the landlords going to do? They either have to tell their investors they're not getting money, or they're going to have to tell their banker they're not getting a payment, or the landlords themselves, if they're able, are going to have to cut other expenses like laying people off. Mm-hmm. So the pain, it also exists in aggregate. We are just making decisions about who experiences the pain. Yeah, I had someone here locally say to me, we should force the banks not to collect interest over the months that they're deferring payments on mortgages and credit cards. I said, great, but do you realize the biggest holder of bank stock are pension funds?
Right.
So you're just, the bank is allowing now the individual not to pay, but now our pensioner, Granny, her pension fund takes a hit.
I always point out to communists, I'm like, people already do own the means of production. It's called 401k plans and RRSPs and pension funds.
It's
fools.
True.
It is true. I know. You don't have to tell me. I'm just glad there's another person on the planet who knows this. But to get back to Fallout, to echo Dave's sentiments, what I think now you're talking a change in spending, but an overall drawback in spending. But I've predicted this before as well. The velocity of money is going to drop even more than it has now. And a lot of reasons you don't see inflation in the CPI, which is our consumer goods predominantly. Well, one is because we make it practically at slave labor rates and import a lot of it, but also that people just aren't they're not buying that much stuff. How many gallons of milk do you need? And banks don't lend money out on milk. Banks do lend money out on homes, cars, tuition, things that go up in price and inflation as we've seen. But to answer again, what if this lasts for another 2 months? Will bailout money keep businesses afloat long enough to get back on their feet? Yeah, for 2 months, much more than that. Then we're going to have kind of a discussion of like how much can the United States and other countries produce and print off and lend out. But I think it will keep businesses afloat for 2 months. I've made the argument that this is an opportune time for companies to streamline their operations, but no one listens to me because I'm not a Harvard graduate. And then where do I believe the QE money will go first? First, it's going to go immediately into the consumer economy, but it's going to be stuff that people buy anyway: gas, paper, office supplies, whatever. Whether you're a business or an individual, it's going to go in this kind of stuff. You're not going to see any real change in spending patterns, except, as Dave pointed out, instead of a sit-down restaurant, we're going to Taco Bell, because that's what I've done for the past couple of days. But inevitably, yes, once we all put our money into the banks and it gets there, it will inevitably seep its way into asset prices. And if we use the financial crisis of 2007, 2008 as any metric, it's going to take 4 to 5 years for that to infiltrate and get back. But then it keeps going up and up. So, I mean, a decade's time, you look at stock prices from the bottom in 2008, 2009, and a decade later went up 4 times. Yeah, you could see an increase of 4-fold depending on how much money we print off and what the fractional reserve banking ratio is. So, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Now, the velocity of money is going backwards in some cases right now. I looked at my American Express app on my phone, and I within 2 little finger scrolls, I saw like 6 negative things. Like my kids' basketball fees are being refunded, and hockey tickets are being refunded. Like all the events and things that were set to come up, or the money's flowing backwards. So it's.
All right, here we got one. Oh no, we're not doing this one. That's spam. That's spam. There we go, Juan. What about states? Is there states you recommend not to buy a business? For example, California. Juan lives in San Francisco and is regularly flummoxed with the traffic and its eccentricities. But in general, I mean, I know you're Canadian, but is there any general areas you do? Alberta for the Canadians and Texas for Americans, or what?
No. Well, here's what I always say to people is that a business is simply a vehicle to personal goals. So the decision to buy a business always has to start with sketching out what your life should look like in 10 years. Okay. So if my goal is to be married and have some kids and have a certain kind of house, and I want to have that classic car that Clary's trying to buy, then this is what you have to sketch out, and then you have to figure out what's the easiest way for me to get this. And if it means moving to a different state with lower taxes is going to lower the hurdle that you have to jump over to achieve all those things, then that's the decision you make and you move. I've served many clients over the years who have been selling businesses in places like California because they want to move to places like Texas. And a lot of it is the tax that's driving them. At the same time, I've got a client in LA who just bought another business further north, and he's never moving from LA because he does business with different levels of government. And so that's where his customers are, and that's where he's going to have to stay.
Yeah. We got a paid one here. This is more economics. Deal on for $10. Well, I got to read through. Guys, no super chats today. I'm only answering these because you guys already said, but these are just questions for Dave. For $10, current America versus Weimar Germany, your opinions, not even comparable. Weimar Germany was destroyed. They were building up their economy. Their infrastructure was totaled. America doesn't have that. I think if you want to see something, go look at the Spanish flu back in 1918. I think that'd be probably the best approximation, but we didn't have quite the debt or the leverage we did back then.
And most people were living in self-sufficient, sustaining homestead type places at that time. So we didn't even really have an economy any close to what we have today back then.
Right. Josh, for $5, should you take a loan to buy a business if the cash flow covers the loan payments? Simple, I guess, policy question for you, Dave.
So I believe that you can use debt to buy things that produce cash flow, and you can leverage yourself to greater wealth by doing that. But how much you borrow and from who is a big question. So I don't mind borrowing from banks if I'm borrowing from banks to buy tangible things, inventory, machinery, equipment, real estate, trucks, etc. Because if something should go south, there is an inherent plan B. Sell the stuff and pay off the bank. And so who you owe the money to is a big question. And that's why, for the fluffier things like goodwill, you want to owe the money to the seller, because you want them to be, to use Aaron's words, you want them to be tied in. You want the seller to have an interest in your success, because if the seller gets cash on closing and walks away, he's got no reason to answer your phone calls. If the seller is still owed $100,000 when he sells you the business, regardless of the training and transition period you negotiate, that person will take your phone call. If you call them up and say, look, I've got a problem in the business. Did you ever face a situation like this? They will be helpful. They will want to help you because they want you to succeed, because they want their money. And if things go south, who is easier to negotiate? A bank that has a special loans department with lawyers on staff. Those guys have a process. They will drag you through the mud. They'll ruin your personal credit score. They'll do anything they can to get the money from you. If you owe money to a person, you talk to that person, you work out a different deal, you work out a payment plan, what have you. If they want to foreclose, they got to pay an attorney to do the process. So they actually have a hurdle that makes them want to negotiate and work out a deal with you. So it's not just what you owe, it's who you owe and what the terms are. And right now, it would be, what a lot of people do is they don't necessarily get business loans. So they see an opportunity to buy a business, they go and they remortgage their house and they take a personal line of credit, for example, to buy the business. What you're doing there is you're buying a highly risky asset by leveraging relatively safe and secure assets and putting them at risk with the business. And so it has worked out for a lot of people in a lot of circumstances when everything's been going up. But when we get into a turbulent time like we have now, it creates more risk. I don't like to see people do that.
I remember when I was in underwriting, the lending policy varied from bank to bank, but they're all poor. They had a debt service coverage ratio. To answer Josh, what you want to look into, just something for you to research. Look up debt service coverage ratio, DSCR, and different banks have different policies in which they'd lend and blah blah, and of which they ignore. But I remember banks having a 1.25 minimum, and I'm like, a quarter above. I mean, are you kidding? Somebody hiccups and you got a problem. But Josh, what I like, this is just me, I'm very risk averse. I would prefer to see 3, but at minimum, at least twice, because something's going to happen like this. An emergency is going to, you got to buy a new pickup truck or a big, large piece of equipment and machinery. You want at least 2. So look that up, debt service coverage ratio, absolutely 2 or more, preferably 3. I mean, as high as possible is what
I teach 2 as a minimum as well.
Okay.
But here's the thing that people always forget is when you're looking at a small business, they're typically, the cash flow is advertised as either a normalized EBITDA, which is the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or what's called seller's discretionary earnings, which is the EBITDA and then the owner's salary as well. So it's the total cash flow that someone gets by being in the business and working full time. And people will overcommit that cash flow to debt service. They'll say, "Oh yeah, I'll commit 70% of that," and I'll be like, "Whoa,
Wait a minute.
What money are you taking home to feed your kids?" And don't forget, this is the cash flow before interest and taxes. Who's going to pay those bills for you?
What my favorite one was like depreciation and amortization. Oh, those are non-cash expenses. I'm like, excuse me, how do you finance? That I got a buddy who flies airplanes. But Dave, did you know airplanes are expensive? Did you know they're a little pricey? Like, you got to earmark some funds to replace an engine or a building or an assembly line. Like, they think that the DNA on EBITDA is just like magic manna from heaven. Like, and I've even made the argument they shouldn't even be listed. Like, if you're a large enough company and you're constantly replacing capital assets, no, expense them all. I just want to see, because it's going to average out in the end. That's a much more accurate measure, I'd say.
Well, what's interesting, and this is the world of business brokers, the people who do these deals, is a very murky world because the commission rates are high, but it can take over a year for someone to do a deal and get paid. So there was a small cadre of really successful business brokers that have made a good living and are very qualified and helpful, and they don't want to waste their time. And then there's a bunch of people who are churning through all the time, who don't know what they're doing. And so there are certain industries where we don't use EBITDA as the cash flow. We use EBIT or some other measure. So if you were going to buy a foundation construction company that builds foundations for homes,
Right.
we'd use EBIT as the cash flow, not EBITDA, because they're always replacing the trucks and the big equipment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You put them through a ton of work every season. Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're buying a corner retail store with some gondola shelving, that's when you don't really need to pay that much attention to depreciation.
Right. Right. But like trucking or anything where your machinery or your capital equipment is taking wear and tear. Yeah, absolutely. I've never, I mean, I could just look at EBIT and like that's what I would prefer. But when I did that, I would be reprimanded and yelled and not a team player. And
what I do as a crutch is I'll tell people to use the EBITDA number and then figure out 5 pieces of equipment that might need to be replaced in the next few years and go online to a leasing calculator and use those lease payments in your projection of cash flow as an expense. And that it will be a proxy for the actual cost of replacing the capital equipment. And it really is what you will have to pay the leasing company to finance that for you.
Outstanding. Yeah, no, it's a way to do. Though I guess we're going. How far into depth does your seminar go? Like analyzing a cash flow statement and the difference between EBIT and EBITDA and the ramifications of that.
The course follows a case study. So there's some lecture style learning, but then there's a case study where we actually look at a specific business and we do a normalization. And then we look at what the assets are in the business and it's different programs for financing it and all that kind of thing. And so it is quite in depth. I recently got an email from a retired U.S. Army sergeant who said that he took my course and he was looking at some online businesses and was able to spot the fact that they hadn't normalized the labor. And he said, you know what? There's the owners working in this business this many hours a week. We have to recognize that expense. And when he did that, of course, the cash flow dropped dramatically. And he said, this is the true cash flow. This is what I'm buying because I got to do the work. I need a wage.
Right. And he's making $2 an hour or something like that at the end. Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that people are presented with all the time in the world of buying a business. They're shown a cash flow. The other thing too is when you combine 2 dissimilar assets together. So you could have a corporation that owns a building that it works out of. So you're not going to find a rent expense on that P&L. But businesses are valued differently than buildings. And so if the building requires a certain net operating cash flow to warrant the value of the building, it means part of the profit of that business is actually the building's rental income.
Right.
And so we have to split those apart through normalization. What we end up doing is removing the building from the balance sheet and we put a rent and what we call imputed rent. This is what the business should be paying. And then we've isolated the activity of the business from the real estate. You learn all that stuff in the course.
Right. Are they going to remember it all though?
That's why they can keep logging in all the time to review.
Or just pay Dave the damn money and hire him. Okay. That just, I'm trying to think of something like, you know what I'm going to do today, Dave? Because it's kind of cool outside and I'm in an apartment. I don't have my place anymore. I sold my place and all that. I need to change oil. I would normally change my oil. You know what? It's worth it to pay somebody else to change the oil today because I can't find a place to jack up there. Just pay Dave the money if you have any questions. Because again, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 in consulting fees is infinitely cheaper than you filing for bankruptcy because you emptied out $100,000 in your 401k. Just saying. I'd
love to speak to that particular one, Aaron, because I made
please do, because people they don't understand the risks involved here and how much do you do your own dental work, Dave? I know we talked about cutting our own hair, which is fine, but do you do your own dental work?
No,
we pay someone. So, but go on.
Well, there's all kinds of people out there who talk about using retirement money, and there's people withdraw 401k money, but then there's these other schemes where you can kind of get your 401k put into this new company, and it's very complex. Whenever people come to me and they say, do you think it's okay for me to use my retirement money to buy this business? The number one question I ask them in response is, if it doesn't work out, do you still plan to retire? because that money is for your retirement.
Right.
Right.
Should be earmarked for it. Yes. The business should not take any extra capital long term. It shouldn't consume it. Correct. Do they look at you like, what are you talking about? Because they've never thought about actual retirement? Or?
Entrepreneurs are by definition very optimistic folks and believe that things are going to work out okay and things are going to be okay. People who buy businesses are not necessarily entrepreneurs. They're in an investor category. They realize there's risk, which is why they want to spend money to buy a business that's already making money, so they avoid that risk of the startup, right? And so there's less risk for buying a business than for starting one. But as we've seen, and as I tell people repeatedly, you can never account for all the risks. So I've had clients who had very successful restaurants, for example, that are highly dependent on tourist season. And then one summer, the city decides to tear up and replace all the water and sewer, and the street is torn up for 3 months in front of their restaurant in their peak season. This got nothing to do with the waiters, the recipes, the servers, the customer service, the advertising, none of those things. And that business ended up closing. And this COVID thing, I mean, how many businesses out there had a pandemic plan?
Yeah, and if it was some token amount at a corporate meeting, right?
I was watching a live report from some of the administrators in New York who are trying to prepare for the big surge of COVID cases they have there, and one of them said that every hospital had a plan for an emergency, and the plan at every hospital involved moving patients to other hospitals. And now they're in a crisis where everybody in the country is having the same problem at the same time. And so they got to rewrite their plan because they never really foresaw this.
Well, it's too late to rewrite the plan. It's like the interbank lending system. Oh, we'll just go to the other banks when all the other banks in the crisis go to the. I shouldn't laugh, but but yeah, no one is asking you to be God and figure things. Nobody can predict everything. I'm just saying if you're in the business of running a business, let me ask you if you agree with this. Before you even buy a business, you should take a couple accounting classes and teach yourself some accounting. I mean, online for free. I'm not saying go and spend money at college, but it really helps. You have to be able to read an income statement and a balance sheet, a cash flow statement before you run a business.
You need to know how to look at them and how to read them. But I think that the piece of accounting advice that I've heard many times, and I would reiterate, is that when you get into business, people will talk about how you need to have an accountant. That's true. Mm-hmm. I would reiterate the fact that you should be working with a bookkeeper, someone who costs a lot less money than the accountant, who can meet with you regularly and make sure your books are up to date. And working with a good bookkeeper is going to teach you about how to read those statements. You know, it's amazing to me the people I meet who are sellers in some cases, who've owned a business for decades, who've been very successful and earned a lot of money. And they don't realize that, you know, things that happen on the balance sheet maybe are separate from things that happen on their P&L. Like they don't quite realize what things happen where and how this has an effect on different things. And I'm like, wow, you know, you're really lucky you have a high margin and good sales.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because if you didn't, you would have been gone long ago. Mm-hmm. And there, you know, I see a lot of people who've been successful over my life because they have the right product at the right time in the right place. And sometimes it goes to their head. They think that they're a business expert because they've been successful. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they were lucky in a lot of ways. I don't think they understand the value of that.
Yeah. Margins can hide a tremendous amount of rot. I just remember, and this would just be me. When we get a loan application and the owner would come in like, okay, where's your financial statements? Oh, no, wife does that. I'm like, let me guess. She's not a board certified CPA, is she there, Jessup? So sure enough, wife comes in. I'm not kidding, Dave. One time it was handwritten. I'm like, this is your accounting system? What about an Excel spreadsheet? What about some software? Like, you guys have got to have good accounting controls so you know whether or not you're making money or not. And what invariably would happen is there'd be no accounting system. What financial statements they give us were completely worthless. And then all of a sudden they need more money. And then the point was moot. They were hemorrhaging cash flow. They were losing money. And now they needed to get a third mortgage on their house or whatever. Yeah. So before buying a business, it really does behoove you to spend a couple weeks learning what is an income statement, what is a balance sheet, what is a cash flow statement. I don't think you need to learn to reconcile the balance sheet operating accounts to the cash flow statement, but it really does help to be able to read those. And then, like Dave said, get a good bookkeeper to keep a good accounting. You have to get an accountant or a bookkeeper. You have to have an accounting method. Don't just throw in all the receipts, give it to Chad Elkins at the end. Here, figure that out for me. You don't know what you're. I'm surprised you can pay estimated taxes if you don't know what you're making. So yes, definitely. And that you don't need to take a seminar for that. That's something that you can do on your own. But before you sign up for Dave's class, definitely go and take some. How much time they got? It's October, right? When your online seminars happening?
Oh no. Well, we forgot to finish what I was proposing here.
Oh, yeah.
The best thing about Vegas was going to be after the end of the thing is that people get to hang out and do Q&A.
Sure.
So what I was going to suggest is that what I am doing is I'm offering your audience a discount on the online course. And then a few weeks from now, I was going to invite all the people who took advantage of the discount.
That's right.
And I was going to do a live session over Zoom with those people so that they would get the same benefit as if they had come out in Vegas to see me live, get to meet me, talk with me, ask their own questions. But I wanted to let them go through the course first. Right? There's about 11 hours of content in the course. So you do that over the course of a week in the evenings or on a weekend or something. And then go out and look at some business for sale ads, maybe get your hands on a couple sets of financial statements, apply some of the stuff that was learned, and then come to the live thing. And then you can ask me questions and clear up any confusion and stuff like that. And so that was going to be the little extra that I wanted to offer because I can't get to Vegas to meet everyone.
Yeah, no, I was really looking forward to it because it wasn't only you, but that Canadian guy, that no good Rich Cooper fellow, entrepreneur, he was going to be down there. A bunch of other people. I'm like, oh wow, everyone's going to be here, but now we can't. So the online classes, what do they cost?
It's normally $379. And it's $279 with the code Clary at businessbuyeradvantage.com.
Yeah, and I'll put that in. That's in the comments section.
You put the link in the comments, I think, that goes straight into it.
Businessbuyeradvantage.com. So that's in there. And then the Gumroad link, I had that as well. And then based on the number of people that sign up, when do you estimate? Like a month or two? Because if it's going to take 11 hours, and then if you want to go and look up businesses for sale or whatnot, you don't have a date then for the live Q&A segment,
no,
correct?
So if I see like a dozen people come through, what I'll do is I'll wait a week or two and I'll poll those people and I'll just say, hey, I'm thinking about this time. And I'll just pick a time that works for those guys. And if someone can't make any of the times, I'll offer them a recording of that session.
Okay, cool, yeah. Cool.
I'm pretty flexible because I know that I'm not going to get 100 people, right? It's, the decision to buy a business should be made by somebody who is responsible with their money, has some savings in the bank, don't have a lot of consumer debt. If you got a mortgage, that's fine. But this is a decision where you're choosing to take money that may be saved in savings accounts and you're going to put it into a highly illiquid asset that has quite a degree of risk. You can do amazing things with a business. You can't buy an apartment building and double its revenue, but you can buy a business and double its revenue, over a couple of years if you introduce the right things into it to help it grow. And so you can do amazing things, but on the flip side, it can be risky. You can buy a world famous pizzeria and decide to change the sauce recipe and you can lose all your customers in a week.
Right.
So there's risk involved. So this is for someone who wants to be in business, doesn't want the risk of starting something, has a solid financial foundation. They've got some money in the bank. And that's the kind of person who's going to be able to access capital. And if you poke around on the internet, you're going to find all kinds of guys who are going to have courses for $10,000 that teach you how to buy a business with no money.
Do they wear the hats this way and talk? And they got some like dank California West Side rap in the background, or
There have always been people making money off of promising something for nothing.
What if I put a Lamborghini behind me and I take a picture? Will that look dope? Will that happen? Will that? No.
I hear from so many people who've been taken by those things, Aaron, that I actually on my blog site I had to add a page called "Buy a Business with No Money," and I put all the videos I've made over the years where I explain how it's just not doable unless you're buying a business that's really a liability. Someone's trying to foist off on you, which means that you need to be a turnaround expert. There's an association of people who are turnaround experts, and they're very proud of the fact that they have a success rate of about 15%.
Oh.
Okay. So there's, if the airplane is heading down and is moving fast enough, very few pilots are able to pull back that stick in time, I guess
and they're happy. That's like a batting average, they're happy with 15%, and it's like publishing. That 15% covers the rest of their losses.
Yeah.
But that's still a horrible failure rate.
Right. So someone who's never owned a business to go into something that's failing and think that they can pull it or turn it around, that's a game for people with huge experience in that particular industry.
With connections too, who know the guy who can get you the equipment and all that other jazz.
Yeah. I once sold a bottled water company to a guy, and before he signed the deal to buy the company, he had already signed a deal to sell bottled water to a chain of retail stores. Right? Like he was using his connections to minimize his risk. He already knew he was going to grow sales by 20%.
Right.
Because he already signed that deal.
Awesome.
That's an example of the kind of strong player who can do a turnaround.
Right. Well, awesome. Well, that's all the questions we had in the chat room. That's all the questions pretty much I had, although I knew what your business was, but I was kind of curious on your take, especially given the chaos in the markets and everything. But to reiterate my point, now is the time. If for any other reason you have the time to evaluate and research this, everyone's forced to be at home. You got to get away from your spouse, whatever. Consider taking Dave's course online. The link is down in the description of the video below. And even if you don't buy a business, then it probably helps. Like that guy you said who found out he did the imputed labor cost and found out that sergeant. Guys, if it helps prevent you from making a mistake, it was worth it. All right. But if you're going to go and use a business to enrich yourself for work, for a career, and for early retirement, just regular retirement, do it right. This is not betting on bowling. This is pretty serious stuff. So take a minimum of his class, links below, hire him out if you need to, if there's a business down the road, but then he will have that Q&A session for those who do sign up for his online classes with the discount Clary. And again, links are over there in the description. Anything else, Dave? Or is it?
No, if people are interested in deal making and business stuff, I've got a YouTube channel and I've got an email list. If they go over to davidcbarnett.com, they can sign up for the email list. I send out stuff every day, and every week there's a new video where I answer questions. And it's certainly a place where people can expand their knowledge with no investment if they're curious about learning about this kind of thing. Let me find your YouTube channel. I'll put that in the discussion board then. What do I search? David C. Barnett? Yeah, I think it's just in there as David Barnett. But David Barnett. Oh, this guy looks familiar. Yeah, it's what I look like without a beard, I think. Whoa. How young are you here? Look at that. Look at all that color in your beard, Dave. Oh, my goodness. That's all right, I'll put that there. Got that. And I've got some books on Amazon and all kinds of stuff. So it's my personal mission is to help people avoid bad deals. I've had too many people reach out to me who say things like, I wish I had found your channel a year ago. I lost $300,000 by doing this. And it's heartbreaking because, time is money. Money is time. That person worked hard to save up those $300,000 and then they lost it all. That was literally some other person came along and stole that person's time from history. That the labor they put into earning that money has been taken from them, and that's slavery. Slavery is what it is. Yeah. If you overpay for a business, you are indenturing yourself you're making yourself into an indentured servant. You're like the guy in Ireland a couple hundred years ago who signs up to work on a farm for 3 years in exchange for a ticket across the water.
So, all right, well, there you go. Businessbuyeradvantage.com. That's the main flagship site. Questions, shoot them off to Dave. And your email and contact is there if people have questions, right?
Absolutely.
Outstanding. All right, well, thanks, Dave, for coming on the show. And then when you do set a date for this, let me know. We'll plug it again, and we'll get the troops all riled up to go to that live thing. All right.
Okay. It'll be before the end of April.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, Dave. See ya.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.